evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. We begin tonight with a story that has refused to go away. And not because of the facts involved, but because of a concerted effort on the right to stoke scandal at any cost. Tonight, CBS News is retracting, apologizing for, and plans to correct a story it broadcast on its crown jewel program 60 Minutes about the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, that killed 4 Americans last year. A story it broadcast using a government contractor who claimed to be an eyewitness to the attack, but who, it appears, was not in fact where he said he was on the night in question. The so-called eyewitness did not apparently see the events he claimed to describe. On CBS This Morning, 60 Minutes correspondent Lara Logan acknowledged the mistake.
You know, the most important thing to every person at 60 Minutes is the truth. And today the truth is that we made a mistake. And that's very disappointing for any journalist. It's very disappointing for me. Nobody likes to admit that they made a mistake. But if you do, you have to stand up and take responsibility, and you have to say that you were wrong. And in this case, we were wrong.
The explosive charge in Logan's original report was that there was an eyewitness account from a British security contractor named Dylan Davies, who used the pseudonym Morgan Jones, who claimed the U.S. could have sent backup to the besieged facility because he himself was able to go enter it and do battle with the bad guys.
Morgan Jones scaled the 12-foot-high wall of the compound that was still overrun with al-Qaeda fighters.
One guy saw me. He just shouted. I couldn't believe that he'd seen me because it was so dark. He started walking towards me.
And as he was coming closer?
As I got closer, I just hit him with the butt of the rifle in the face.
And no one saw you do it?
No.
Or heard it?
No, there was too much noise.
To a Benghazi scandal fire that was finally in its dying embers, the 60 Minutes report was a gallon of gasoline. The next morning, the Fox News tour began, featuring Steve Doocy and Senator Lindsey Graham.
CBS did this story on Benghazi, and I see criticism from the left where they go, you guys are covering a phony scandal. 60 Minutes doesn't cover phony scandals.
If we don't have a joint select committee to get out of this stovepiping problem, we're never going to get the truth. And where are the survivors? 14 months later, Steve, the survivors, the people who survived the attack in Benghazi, have not been made available to the U.S. Congress for oversight purposes. So I'm going to block every appointment in the United States Senate until the survivors are being made available to the Congress. I'm tired of hearing from people on TV and reading about stuff in books.
Because of the 60 Minutes segment, Senator Lindsey Graham was going to block every appointment made by the president. But even then, that day, even on that Monday, it was apparent that the so-called eyewitness may have had some pretty questionable motives. Media Matters founder David Brock, on our own show that very night, disclosed that even Fox News itself was evidently wary of using Dylan Davies as a source.
And the other witness appears to be some type of British mercenary who apparently, in conversations with Fox News, asked for money to talk. And so, you know, Fox News even drew a line there, but it was good enough for CBS.
Turns out CBS was also publishing Davies' book through its company Simon & Schuster, a connection with 60 Minutes did not disclose during that original report. As for Davies, while Fox News may have shied away from him because he asked for money, it didn't stop the very same Fox News from running more than 13 segments over 11 different shows inspired by the CBS report. The right's delight at mainstream validation of their own pet obsession was even comically evident at a campaign rally for the now defeated Virginia gubernatorial candidate Ken Cuccinelli a week before Tuesday's election. Cuccinelli's warm-up acts were stoking the crowd with the Benghazi, including Congressman Frank Wolf.
The man who is going to get to the bottom of what happened in Benghazi.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that introduction. And we are going to get to the bottom. And if anyone watched 60 Minutes last night, you can see why we need a select committee.
Then, last Thursday, the Washington Post reported that Davies' account to 60 Minutes and the story in his book were different from an incident report he himself filed with his own employer, Blue Mountain Security. But CBS News stood by their story, continued to defend it despite multiple queries. CBS News chairman and 60 Minutes executive producer Jeff Fager said he was proud of the program's reporting on Benghazi and, quote, confident the sources told accurate versions of what happened that night. But the bottom finally fell out yesterday when the New York Times reported that Mr. Davies told the FBI he was not, in fact, on the scene until the morning after the attack.
But what we now know is that he told the FBI a different story to what he told us. And, you know, that was the moment for us when we realized that we no longer had confidence in our source and that we were wrong to put him on air. And we apologize to our viewers. We will apologize to our viewers, and we will correct the record on our broadcast on Sunday night.
Joining me now is Bill Carter, a reporter for the New York Times who covers the television industry. He wrote the Times story on this today. Bill, my head's spinning. How did this happen?
Well, I think it happened because CBS was looking to get a new angle on the story. They got a book, and in the book, this security man claimed that he was there, and they went through what they considered a vetting process and decided that he was credible and put him on the air. I think they needed a new angle because I don't think they had a lot of other new material in that report. So they really needed this guy to be truthful. And they were in the middle of this situation where, he was saying one thing to his boss and a different thing to them, but there was a credible reason for that because he had left his villa when he was supposed to not go to the scene. And what he told was a dramatic story, and that added a lot of drama to what CBS wanted to report.
What's interesting to me is that even when the issues start to be raised about his credibility, Media Matters is raising issues. Then on Thursday, there's the Washington Post report. It follows this kind of classic cycle, which is ignore, deny, double down, and then eat crow.
Yes, and I spoke to Lara Logan before it blew up, and she was very adamant about how credible this guy was. And
she was adamant about how credible it was to you when you talked to her.
Yes, she said, she believed in what he said, and she didn't think he'd given two versions, and the FBI report would prove that. The FBI, that he gave the same report to the FBI that he gave to CBS. And so that became really the critical aspect of it. Would the FBI report corroborate this?
So you've got two versions of the events. You've got the version of the events in the incident report. I stayed in my villa. I wasn't there on the night that I said I saw these dramatic things happening. You have what he told the CBS cameras and the audience of 60 Minutes. And the tiebreaker was, well, what did he tell the FBI? And the tiebreaker goes to he was not there.
And it turns out he gave 3 interviews to the FBI. They interviewed him 3 separate times. And in each occasion, he told the story the way it came out in the incident report. He stayed in the villa. He didn't go to the scene. And when I spoke to CBS about that last night, and they were obviously taken aback by that. They then spent the next couple of hours themselves checking with their FBI sources, and by this morning, they'd gotten the same report we had, which is that the FBI version was not their version.
I want to bring in Eric Boehlert, Senior Fellow at Media Matters for America, Stephen Reiner, former producer for 60 Minutes at CBS, now Director of Broadcast and Digital Journalism at Stony Brook University. Eric, well, you guys at Media Matters, I mean, in some ways, this is not to be uncharitable here, but I'll tell the truth. This is a little ideologically overdetermined in the case of Media Matters. Like, you guys are a liberal group.
Yes.
You fact-check conservatives. Conservatives are obsessed with Benghazi.
Right.
Maybe people might say, well, Media Matters, stop clock being right twice a day. But you guys were right about this.
No, we've been right about Benghazi for 13 months now. I mean, we have been fact-checking the story to death. And when CBS decided we want a piece of that pie, we want a piece of that right-wing media narrative, there are lingering questions when there are none. When this story has been exhaustively researched by Congress, military leaders have talked about, what the reinforcement response was. When they decided they wanted to sort of key into that buzz machine you talked about, Fox News the next day for an hour, the senator talking about it. What's the number one way to know you've hit a home run is the next day a senator's talking about your story. They knew that was all predetermined. They couldn't resist it. The story didn't add up. There were no lingering questions. The conflicts of interest should have stopped them.
Yeah.
The discrepancies in the narrative should have stopped them. They should have apologized a week ago. Right. This whole thing is a train wreck. Conception, execution, denial, all of it.
I want to make very clear here, Stephen, I don't want to put a dagger in 60 Minutes. I have just tremendous admiration for 60 Minutes. I really do. It's an incredible franchise. It's incredible they do the journalism they do, that they get the ratings they do, that they produce the profit they do. In some ways, it's like a miracle that it exists in television journalism, which is why I think all of us take it so seriously. What is it like in that building today?
It's obviously a very, very difficult day for everyone there, but my question is how much real self-examination is being done there? I watched Lara this morning on CBS this morning, and even though there was an apology and even though there was borderline mistakes were made, I don't believe there still was an adequate explanation of just what kind of vetting really was done at the end of the day. It's journalism 101. You have a single source.
Yes, exactly.
And you have
the most dangerous thing in the universe.
And you have a single source who is a self-interested source because the source is trying to sell books.
Yes.
And then you have a story which is a political hot potato, which can be red meat to certainly one side of the argument.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that raises the bar and makes it even more crucial that you do your due diligence. And I didn't hear anything in the explanation of what we did to vet that leads credibility to the argument we were fooled. You shouldn't have been fooled.
So the Bowler thesis here, right, is that this was basically, you see this story and you think this is going to light up the right.
And it did.
And it did. And it's also like a box for us to check the next time we're accused of liberal media bias. Be like, remember we did that Benghazi story?
Right.
And like, just so folks understand the universe this is coming out, Threshold is the imprint of Simon & Schuster.
Yeah, right.
That was publishing the book, although it has now been recalled today. That's the other latest thing. Being pulled out of, we were trying to get video of like them packing up the books. We thought it'd be a good, nice visual element.
By the way, that's a CBS decision, not a Threshold decision.
Right, that's a CBS decision. It's getting pulled from the top. Now, Threshold is a conservative imprint that publishes books by Glenn Beck, Sarah Palin. One book called Censorship, The Threat to Silence Talk Radio, Mark Levin. I mean, that's the world this story is coming out of. It's like, those are some red flags.
Yes, they wanted to key into it. Like I said, there's an automatic audience there. But when you're going to wade into that, you have to be extra careful.
Right.
You cannot stain your reputation just because you want to sort of fuel this. One other quick point. After the National Guard story, in 2004, 60 Minutes, their last real huge embarrassment, they appointed an independent panel. Came outside, did lots of interviews, hired lawyers, and looked at this. And I don't see, if they did that for that, how they don't do that for this.
I want to talk about that. Mary Mapes, who was famously the Dan Rather's producer on the story on the National Guard documents, which were forged documents about President George W. Bush's record in the National Guard, famous Rathergate scandal, right? Mary Mapes had this to say: "My concern is the story is done very pointedly to appeal to a more conservative audience's beliefs about what happened at Benghazi. They appear to have done the story to appeal specifically to political conservative audience, obsessed with Benghazi, believes Benghazi much more than a tragedy." You can't avoid Rathergate parallels here, Bill.
Well, yeah, you can't avoid them because everybody's going to think of it. But, I mean, I do think, to me, this is a far lesser scandal than that, because I don't see this as, it's not like people aren't doing this in a presidential election to try to influence voting, etc. I think, and I may be wrong, but I think people have to step back and say, look, there's a lot of agendas that were being played out here. Now, you're saying CBS wanted to court the right or whatever. And
well, I was saying that. I called it the Bowler thesis.
But okay, that's the Bowler thesis. But my sense is they wanted to do something on Benghazi, spent a long time doing it, and didn't have a whole lot. And then this guy's book showed up.
Right.
That's what I think happened. That's my guess.
It was a mini perfect storm.
Right.
I mean, they needed to inject a big B12 shot into that Benghazi story.
Which was dead. I mean, this was the story that brought it back.
Also, one of the things we try to tell some of our students is, how to watch television and be aware that this fellow's story had nothing, I mean, in essence, had nothing to do with the same old story they were telling in the rest of the piece.
Right.
It was a little bit of smoke and mirrors. Let's inject a dramatic, heroic story into this, and somehow we'll give all the rest of it deeper meaning.
I want to say one thing.
Which is what you pointed out.
Yes, and I want to say one thing about getting involved in this. You then see the impact, because the State Department didn't like this at all. They didn't like this at all, and they kind of went after this guy.
Yeah.
And they wanted to go after. And so reporting on this is a minefield.
Yes, right.
It's a minefield.
And what I don't want to happen is to say, well, something's an ideological minefield, let's not step into it.
No, absolutely.
What does have to happen is, if
how about
you step into
debunking it? How about debunking the Benghazi
or just do due diligence and don't put up what appears to be a serial fabricator and put the credibility of the crown jewel of CBS News on the line. Bill Carter from the New York Times, Eric Boehlert from Media Matters, Stephen Reiner from Stony Brook University. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Coming up, this is the city of Pasadena's website. See right here where it says, we have the kind of community, culture, and government responsiveness that are attracting attention. They are attracting attention for one thing related to their government, their effort to suppress the Latino vote. Why a Texas town's ballot initiative was the most important election of the week you haven't heard about. Coming up.